Welcome to our second podcast of our series of Jet Set Learn. Today my guest is Greg Mekkes, a test director at NASA-Langley. You and I have been kind of knocking around for years, separate things, and I've been wanting to get you out here on the podcast for a while now. And so just as you know, the Forgotten Heroes, what we're doing out here, because you've actually volunteered out here a couple times.
Yeah.
And the things that we like to do is explore and meet people that are in technological things, STEM and aviation, and then use those meetings and introductions to inspire people to do things. So I thought your story, and I want to get a little bit into that, I thought your story is very, very inspirational, at least for me, just from from an aviation standpoint and as well as just the technical side of it. So So I guess the first question I have is, like, where are you from originally?
I grew up in a little town called Granville outside of Grand Rapids, Michigan, and that's where I was until I transferred to go to school at Purdue and then ultimately out to Virginia to NASA-Langley. So it was Michigan was where I grew up.
Yeah, Michigan. And so, you just mentioned you're going to NASA-Langley. What did you study at Purdue?
So it was Aerospace Engineering. It was one of those crazy things. It's like, as someone coming through high school, you're looking at potential schools and, you look at this stuff and you think, well, if it was good enough for Neil Armstrong, it should be good enough for me. How crazy is that? But actually, that was a draw. A lot of astronauts did come through Purdue University. And if I was going to study aeronautical engineering, that just seemed like a fantastic place to go in my mind.
So I'm going to ask you a hard question.
Yes.
What's the difference between aerospace engineering and aeronautical engineering?
Well, that is an interesting question. It's, okay, at Purdue, when you graduate, you get that piece of paper. It is BSAAE. It's got both. So it's just pick one, pick both. It's kind of the same sort of thing.
Okay. So with I'm assuming you had some classes in just space vehicles.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then from an aeronautical, was that mostly like in the normal atmospheric vehicles? Is that one way to kind of divvy it up?
That is a perfect way to divvy it up. Yeah. It's like aeronautical is sort of like that continuum flow, that airflow going over the wing of an airplane. Yeah. And then, non-continuum flow, Newtonian impact, think satellite aerodynamics.
So you sounded like you had in high school decided you want to get in. That's some big brain stuff to be thinking about in high school. So what kind of things were kind of drawing you at that early age towards STEM and aerospace aeronautical engineering?
This was a crazy thing. Okay, 9th grade. There was this career interest survey that they gave us. And you're filling that thing out and didn't think twice about it and you handed it in.
Yeah.
And I don't know, maybe 2, 3, 4 months later, there's this thing that came in the mail. And it was like, you seem to have an interest in, things aeronautical or mechanical, whatever, that type of thing. And it was actually through the Explorer branch of the Boy Scouts, and they were offering a ground school to take the FAA written exam that you need to take to get your pilot's license. Okay, now, hit pause and rewind a little bit. What had I been doing all these summers way back when? I'd go to the library with my mom, and you had to know the Dewey Decimal System back then. And if you knew the Dewey Decimal System, it was 629 was where all the books about airplanes were. And so that's where I made a beeline to. So I was reading all of these books, and I still remember this one book. It was called Anyone Can Fly. And it was written by ABC News commentator Jules Bergman, who got his pilot's license. And he was always the one on the network news that was commenting on, this aviation, event or something like that. He was their go-to. But he had his private pilot's license. And so here's this book about, it was kind of half the process of learning to fly and half stories about flying and fun things you could do and places you could go. Oh, I was so hooked on that book. And so this thing came in the mail, and it's like, do I want to take a course to do that? Yeah, that was a no-brainer. So as a 9th grader, once a week I was going out to the, large airport there in Grand Rapids, and going into this conference room, and we had this class once a week, and when all was said and done, we were signed off, and I took the written test, and I started taking flying lessons with them in 10th grade.
Wow. So we at the foundation, we definitely see the value in giving people as early as possible exposure to these things, and kind of wait and see something stick. Your story seems to continue to be very similar and be aligned to what we've seen from other people that we've worked with, in particular Lucia Morton, who you mentor to a degree at NASA-Langley in our episode number 1 podcast. She was out. So the question I have really is, what were there any significant people mentoring you along your path to becoming an aerospace/aeronautical engineer?
Yeah, I would say, so the guy who was teaching that class at ground school, he was also my initial flight instructor.
Okay.
And then I ended up going to an airport, closer by home. I kind of transitioned to finish it up. And so there were a number of flight instructors, but then out at the airport, airports, what a great place to hang out. There's a guy who's like flying corporate aircraft, for this company or that. He's just hanging around the airport too. So I'm talking to him, and I'm hearing some great stories, and every so often it's like, hey, you want to come along? And it's like, yeah. And so you get to meet and talk with a lot of people. Hanging out at the airport was just magic.
Yeah. One of the cool things I've noticed about aviation just in general is that once someone shows an interest and they get into it, it's like everyone that's kind of involved looks to either give you some information or try to kind of nudge you one way or another.
Yeah.
But I definitely see the value in having some key people in your life that are constantly being able that you can trust to give you the straight information, because not all of the tips of the trade are the best ones to have, and so having someone trusted. So you're a rated pilot, which is awesome.
Yeah.
Aerospace engineer working out at NASA-Langley. So tell me about what you're doing out there at
So currently,
what does a test director do?
Yeah, currently I work at what's called the 8-foot high temperature tunnel, and it is a Mach 7 blowdown tunnel. Now, what do I mean by blowdown? Okay, typically when you think of wind tunnel, let's talk Google Maps satellite view. When you look down on it, it's typically a continuous circuit. There's fan blades to scooch the air around. I'm looking down on it, okay, and it's not going to go Mach 7 because you can't get fan blades to go Mach 7. And so this tunnel being Mach 7 and blowdown, think of like one of those aerosol duster cans with the little plastic straw, and you cut it loose and you blow the air out. That's exactly what this wind tunnel is, except the little plastic straw is a football field length long, and it's called the 8-foot high temperature tunnel. The test section is 8 feet in diameter. And that air is going Mach 7. Let's put that in perspective. That's 1.5 miles a second.
Yeah, so 7 times the speed of sound.
Yeah,
wow.
That's a lot of air.
Yeah. A lot of air, and it's real fast.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of cool stuff out at NASA-Langley.
Yeah.
I think that's probably at the top, because, you gave me a chance to come out there and look, and we'll make some links or have some videos of the tunnel and those kind of things associated with this, but I'm still a little confused just as to so when you say, how do you compress the air so much to get it to release to go, Mach 7?
Okay, so just like you use, like a compressor to pump up a tire or something like that, okay?
So it's no joke compressed air.
That's exactly what it is.
So those big white, I think they were white, white cylinders
Yeah, and there's like 1,400 of these. It's 50,000 cubic feet of air at like pushing 6,000 psi. And we can only run for 2 minutes on condition.
Oh, really?
And then it takes about 14 hours for them to pump it back up. And so that's the gist of it. So it's just a lot of compressed air bottles just blowing air.
Cool. So one more question on that.
Yeah.
What's the coolest project that you can talk about on a podcast that you've seen and kind of done out there?
I would say, okay, here's one of the really cool ones. Okay. We tested the heat shield material for these Mars-bound probes.
Oh, really?
Okay. So now, normally when you think of heat shield, it's things like, shuttle tiles or like the bottom of the Apollo capsule. It's a, huge, rigid, those silica bricks, that are like the shuttle tiles. Well, if you're going to carry something all the way to Mars, you don't want to haul this huge thing. So it was an inflatable heat shield. So it looked like fiberglass cloth and rubber sheet and alternating layers, but you could fold it up and then poof, inflate the thing when you got there. And so we're testing initially these little samples of these cloth buildups, and we're, embedding them into the surface of this thing that we're putting in the tunnel. We could test like maybe a dozen of them at a time, like that one burned through, that one didn't, that one did.
So in 2 minutes you can get burned through?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Oh, we'll cook them.
So what are some of the temperatures like you kind of see out there?
Yeah, so it's like north of 2,500 Fahrenheit.
Really?
Yeah, between that and 3,000 Fahrenheit.
What?
Oh, you can cook stuff. Yeah.
What's the coolest thing you've ever cooked?
Well, I'm telling you about one of them right there.
Yeah.
Well,
you ever throw any crazy things, like throw a hot dog in there or something silly like that?
Well, that we call it our sled that we put those samples in.
Yeah.
So one of the guys brought an egg in right after the test and cracked it open on there. It was beyond ready to eat way too quick. Yeah. It was pretty amazing. Yeah.
Huh.
But okay, so the other thing is heat shields, but scramjet engines.
Yeah.
Like engines that can kind of fly that fast. And I mean, we will put that engine in there and send fuel to it and light it off, and we're running that engine during those couple of minutes. And not unlike like the HyperX flight test, the X-43. That engine was tested in the tunnel there, and it was the same size as what flew. I mean, so it's like, let's try it out ahead of time and figure out its operability envelope, so that when you're doing the real thing, you can kind of drive it right down the center of the envelope and know it's working well.
So looking at this, I know we would never be able to get a scale down project-based learning kind of model of this tunnel to be at 2,500 degrees Fahrenheit around here, but
yeah, it'd get a little intense.
Can you think of do you think that would be a good idea to kind of work with what we do out here as far as what project-based learning opportunities associated with that?
Well, yeah, anything like that, because even when I'm thinking of like coming through school and putting that resume together, okay, what the $1 million question is, what differentiates you from someone else? And really it boils down to hands-on practical engineering experience. So yes, doing anything like that would just be magic, because it gets those gears turning, gets that curiosity rolling, and gives somebody an experience that they never would have had otherwise.
That's really interesting, because I guess at least over the last several months or whatever, thinking about the value in this project-based learning as a efficient education or knowledge transfer. That's one thing. But you just brought up another very interesting one with respect to it being like a resume builder. In fact, employers are looking for hands-on kind of experience, not necessarily. They're in addition to some of your quals. It sounds like is like, hey, they're looking for, hey, have you had. So with us kind of modeling ourselves as a mini internship feeder to whatever.
Exactly.
I think that's a very interesting point to kind of highlight.
Oh, I think that's huge.
Are you seeing that? Because I know you're probably also part of the screening for the interns that come out there and work during the summer or do summer programs. Or is that the kind of things you guys are looking for an internship, or are you also just using the internship to help build that practical?
That's a big aspect too, because like for example, one of the programs that I'm involved with is called the EnCast Program. So NCAS, NASA Community College Aerospace Scholars, because in today's age, you look at, say, a 4-year school, and it's like a lot of times maybe that doesn't make economic sense to like just go off to a 4-year college. I mean, some people end up like almost with the equivalent of a mortgage and student loans coming out of that. And so let's be a little more efficient with how we do that. So, and I actually did the same thing before transferring to Purdue. I went to a smaller school right close by home, lived at home, saved as much money as I could, and I was always mindful of that Purdue course catalog. What did they require? And I was trying to knock out those gen eds and stuff like that so that I could transfer in and hit the ground running. Okay, so there are students out there in community college doing the same thing. I mean, they're going to end up doing fantastic, wonderful things. They're starting out, so it's a little more friendly dollar-wise. But if you ask the average community college student, hey, do you think you can work at NASA? I mean, inevitably, they always say, well, no, I'd just go to a community college. How could I? And it's kind of this stigma. And it's like, how far from the truth could that be? And so this program is intentional in, pulling out the diamonds in the rough, like give them an opportunity, because what happens is there's like competitions. Like there's a mission 1, mission 2, and it's like at their schools and so on. And they kind of, filter down to the really serious ones. And they actually fly them out to a NASA center for a week and put them up in a hotel and bring them out there every day. And then I get to spend some time with them. And, that can be life-changing.
Yeah.
I mean, life-changing. I mean, one of these students, for example, went on to Texas A&M, graduated from there, and I just got the most excited phone call a while back. Guess what? I'm working in mission control at NASA Johnson.
Yeah.
So going from the EnCast program to what's this all about to I'm working in, mission control at NASA Johnson. That's
awesome.
cool.
That's a really awesome story, because part of it goes with what we're talking about.
Yeah.
Forgotten heroes. Don't forget about the hero within yourself.
Yes.
And just because there's maybe some perpetuated misinformation about who can go where, do whatever else.
Oh, exactly.
Tapping into resources that are actually available. It's awesome to hear that NASA is actually being active, about, reaching into those different pools of talent that's out there and not overlooking, because there's a shortage of talent, technical talent here in the United States. And, as many programs as we can put together and cooperate and incentivize and do all kind of things that you and I have been doing with, with their two organizations and those
exactly.
kind of things. But it really is, but it takes quality, cool people like yourself involved and being proactive with it. So, I just wanted to say thanks again for your mentorship to me, because as a
that goes both ways.
As an engineer and pilot,
you're
actually practicing engineer. I just studied it, so it's really cool to see and hear some of the stories on that side. I know aviation in and of itself is pretty cool, but kind of hearing some of the other technical, because it doesn't happen without the technical expertise and those kind of things. So hearing about that is really awesome.
And it's important too, I think, to talk to as many people as you can that are doing what you think you want to do, because they're really the only ones who can really clue you into what's going on and really, I don't know, give you good advice about it. When it comes right down to it. So seek those people out. I
think that I remember the Dewey Decimal, so a little bit. but before we had computers and the World Wide Web in our pocket, getting out and reading out as much as you can in lieu of meeting people, because a lot of people, if they're from a rural area or whatever else that's not next door to NASA-Langley, never really have a chance to meet people that's doing those kind of things. But the information is out there, so if you can dream it, go research it, look for it, and then start positioning yourself to kind of get in. Very much the same way that you did. Like, you were in there reading books about the aviation field. I'm still a little, not to revisit that story too much, but I'm still a little perplexed as why you didn't go, hey, I'm just going to be a pilot. Why did you I want to build these things? What made you?
That's exactly what I had in mind.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll rewind it way back. When I was a little kid, we lived close by this small airport, and I'd watch these airplanes taking off, and it's like, ooh, that's really cool. So now the library thing, the ground school, and learning to fly, this is all starting to come together. I wanted to be an airline pilot. Okay, but it required a 4-year degree. But, I have this interest, in airplanes, and it's like, I would love to be able to design and build my own airplane. Well, so if I have to get a 4-year degree, and I'm interested in that, well, then aeronautical engineering would be the right skill set to have, since I got to do it anyways. And that's really where I was headed. But at that time, unlike today, hiring in the airlines was very stagnant and not happening. To the point where it's like, my goodness, would I be able to support a family doing this? No, not really, quite honestly. And so NASA-Langley was one of the few places, well, let's just say a lot of the aerospace industry is, for example, in Southern California. Well, high cost of living. So I'm, kind of thinking of the big picture. But, NASA-Langley, that kind of was captivating. At the time, the center director of NASA-Langley was from Purdue originally. And so we would actually see him around there at school every so often. And I remember one day, he was like walking up the steps in the Aerospace Engineering Grissom Hall at the time. It's not the building it is now. And it's like, I'm trying to piece together, who's that guy walking next to him? And it's like, oh, that's Eugene Cernan. He walked on the moon. So you saw things like this, and so it's like,
Did you get to meet him?
Well, kind of, not like this, But I mean, it's just kind of cool to see that stuff and be around that stuff. So I did end up out at NASA-Langley. And really, I would say because they did on-campus interviewing at Purdue. And so the guy who came out was recently retired from there, but had a lot of knowledge about the place. And I got to know him, subsequent to that. He arranged for some tours. I came out there one spring break. And so he was kind of an advocate for me. And really, when graduation time rolled around, and I really wasn't sure what I was going to do, because hiring in the aerospace industry can be kind of cyclic, and it was kind of down and going down. And most of the people that I was going to graduate with didn't really know what they were going to do.
So you had this childhood desire to build a plane.
Yes. Let's go back to that.
What I'm hearing and what I know about you is that you're actually, even though you probably didn't build a plane throughout your years up until now, I understand you're actually in the process of building one. Finally! Yes. I promised myself when I graduated from college, an airplane was in the plans. And, families and finances get in the way. But yes, I did buy a Cessna 170, a 1948 Cessna 170, and it was a project plane. And that is currently being worked on and rebuilt. I've got a hangar, a little ways down the road from here. And that's a going deal right now. Is this something you rush through, or do you take your time and get it right?
You take your time and you get it right. And you do a lot of learning, which is fantastic.
We were joking with some kids that came through. Is like aerospace, aeronautical, aviation just is not one of those fields that you want to have partial credit all the time. So I asked the teachers, like, hey, do you want a partial credit pilot flying you? And they were like, no way. So they
full credit.
They were kind of full credit. So that's the reason I kind of asked that, because I know if I was building a plane, it wouldn't be a rush job. I would take my time and measure 3 or 4 times and put things together. But
good strategy.
Yeah. So when do you think when are you shooting to have it finished?
In July.
Nice.
I'm not sure what year.
I just assumed
I do get that asked often. And, I thought I'd be flying it to Oshkosh a year ago when the 75th anniversary of the Cessna 170 was. Well, that hasn't happened. But when it does end up going there, it'll still be just as good.
Yeah. Awesome. So tell me, how can a graduating high school senior get to NASA-Langley, or NASA Johnson, wherever? How can they get in there?
Well, okay. Simple example. In your podcast number 1, Lucia Morton. So she knew someone who had a NASA-Langley connection, who talked to a friend of mine, who then talked to me about, hey, giving a wind tunnel tour, there's this high school student who wants to come out here. So just ask someone who knows someone who knows someone and get you out for a tour, take a look around. And one thing leads to another. Well, so then, okay, there's internships that students, can do out at NASA, even for high school students. Okay, so there's this VASTS program, Virginia Space Grant Consortium, but then the standard NASA internships, and their website is intern.nasa.gov. And there's a lot of information on there. And there's another one called STEM Gateway, but intern.nasa.gov should lead you to that. And there's a lot of information out there. You can even see the exact projects that interns are working on and kind of get some ideas flowing. And that's there to be had. The trick on that is everybody wants to do it in the summer, but there's 10 times fewer interns in the spring and the fall. So doesn't work the first time, try it the next time.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, there are ways.
What were your other thoughts you had?
Well, the other one is, like, when I've talked to a student group in the past, like for one of these EnCast groups, and sometimes I'll talk to the whole group, and it's not uncommon that I'll get a number of requests on LinkedIn. LinkedIn is a great way to find people. That did not exist back in the day. I mean, but that's a great way. And it's typically about a 10% of them. And then out of that, maybe 10% of those, there'll be any kind of back and forth with. So it really turns out to be not that big of a deal. I'm now down to 1 out of 100. Not many do that. So it's really it's not a burdensome thing by any stretch. Now, back in the day, I had to pull duplicate copies of NASA reports from the engineering library and look in the back, and sometimes they'd have information about the author, so I would find papers I was interested in, and you could actually sometimes call them and talk to them. That was the only option I had back then.
Yeah.
But I did that.
So now you're saying LinkedIn, social media, the website
does seem to be a really good way to go.
Okay.
Yeah.
So that was interesting. I didn't know that there were NASA internships for high schoolers.
There are.
Okay. And then in order to get a high schooler to kind of go through that, or to be competitive, not necessarily competitive, but just actually get in, do they have to work through the school, or can they just straight up email NASA like, look, I'm a high schooler, here's my report card, I want in? Like how?
I think I'm not super familiar with it, but it's some of all of the above. But if you look up, like in Virginia, VASTS, VASTS, that's going to lead to something that's going to tell you something about it in short order. You're going to be looking at a webpage that's going to tell you what I'm not able to right now, but it's out there.
Okay.
And then Virginia Space Grant Consortium, look that one up. That's another one. And there's information out there.
Yeah, I guess it's just like anything. It's not going to be handed to you in a silver platter.
Go dig it
Start
out.
digging it up, digging it up.
And asking people.
And that's good, though, that you at least threw some seeds out there for for them to go kind of reach and get after it.
So that's some of the ways, students can find out things about NASA. But now I'm looking at what it says on your shirt right there. It says Forgotten Heroes Foundation. You guys do the same thing, too. How can students take part in what the Forgotten Heroes Foundation is doing out here? Because it's some fun stuff.
Yeah, it is fun, and appreciate you helping us design some of it. The primary way is, so right now we are in the process, and we continue to do this, like reach out to organizations, community organizations, schools as well, and we see what their educational needs are and kind of see where we can actually tailor or kind of design a program for either the summer or, a couple outings or whatever else, just to enrich the learning that they have going on. So with that, there's opportunities that we provide through those connections with either the school or through those organizational leaders that have reached out to us. But we do have a website. It's called ForgottenHeroesFoundation.com. There's a contact page on there, and we can get you signed up for a mailing list, and you can kind of see when we do have some kind of open events that the public will allow public sign up and kind of show up. We try to make it very immersive and very impactful, and so for that we're pretty selective with how and when we do these things, because the weather needs to be right. We got to have the right support and those kind of things, because some of our activities does allow opportunities to go up and go flying, which is my absolute favorite piece of it.
Well, yeah, because I've been out here before, and I mean, I've seen, like, you've had the hangar set up like a classroom, and they're doing some, like, they're building some little piece of electronics, and then, like, they're taking them up, flying and trying it out.
And that's why I asked you about, hey, is there a way for us to miniaturize that wind tunnel? Maybe not get
right, so you
maybe not
right
get Mach
here.
7, but something to that,
Something.
and do it here, and they can get that practical experience at an early age.
Yeah.
Or at any age for that matter, because I'm still learning. So you've helped quite a few people, quite a few students coming through the internship program out there. Was there a person or a mentor that you had that impacted and kind of steered you along the way?
There was. There was someone from NASA-Langley who actually came out to Purdue to do some of the on-campus interviews there, and it was someone who had recently retired from NASA-Langley, so a lot of knowledge about the place. I mean, that was the perfect person to ask any question you had to. And so I knew that was someone that I needed to maintain contact with. And I did. Actually ended up going out to NASA-Langley during one of our spring breaks. And he arranged for some tours of a number of places when I showed up out there. And then I followed up with him further. And as it was getting close to graduation time, and I'm thinking, NASA-Langley, that would really be a great place to be. And so... but that was not something I was necessarily going to pull off by myself. So here comes to the rescue someone who, again, is serving as a mentor, an advocate. NASA-Langley had a hiring freeze going on then. So how was I going to possibly land a career there if they literally were not taking anyone on? Well, he knew the way the place worked like I didn't. And so, unbeknownst to me, he took my resume over to one of the companies that was a contractor of NASA-Langley that provided personnel to them, sat down, talked to the president of the company, and said, "Can you see if you can find a way to get this guy out here?" I didn't know he was doing this. And so, it's like my last final is done. It's like graduation is in a week. I'm not sure what I'm doing. And I get this call from a company I never knew existed about flying out to Virginia to interview for a position at NASA-Langley. It's like, would you be interested? Let me think about that for a minute. Yes. It was incredible. So that's the magic that someone who knows and, serves as a mentor and really an advocate in some ways also, can do these things that you wouldn't even know that this pathway exists.
So that's a lot of, you mentioned two pretty positive characteristics of a mentor. So if people find yourselves in a mentor role, like what are some other things that are qualities of a good mentor? Because I mentioned this earlier. It's like everyone's just willing to give you information. It's not always going to be be the best for you or whatever else. And so, are there any qualities or that you would think of? And I'll give you an example. One of the things I can think of is I do find myself sometimes in mentorship, some type of arrangement, and I try to be more of a cheerleader than a director.
Yes.
Because that person still needs to develop and discover for themselves. Exactly. Discover the hero within themselves. They need to discover that. Not
make the moves.
Yeah. And so encouraging them rather than directing my biases or projecting my biases or my preferences on them. So what do you think about that? Or are there any other qualities of a mentor?
Yeah, well, a couple of things. Okay, so if I'm doing something that someone is interested in doing, obviously, I would potentially be a good source for that. The other thing, though, as far as a good quality for a mentor, I would say is empathy. Like, okay, for example, I received help to get to where I was. And to me, it's almost, I'll say, like a burden on my heart. It's like, I know how helpful that was to me. So I am more than willing to help others be able to do that. And you get these, a group of students in for a week. And, for 1 week, they have really easy access to ask whatever questions they want of people at NASA. What happens next week.
Yeah.
And so I really encourage them, establish those connections so that when you get that burning question next week, you have a way to get it answered. And, yes, the burden is on you to some degree, because who is that going to be? What areas of interest are your areas of interest? But you're here. It's really easy for 1 week. Let's make the most out of that so that you can get those questions answered next week or next month or next year.
So it sounds like follow through, connection. Those are some other qualities.
Absolutely.
Especially taking advantage of those arrangements. Yeah, that's really good. Well, man, I want to thank you again for coming out. It's been awesome again, and I just look forward to working with you some more out here around the foundation and helping people discover their heroes.
You bet.